Hey guys, this is Movie. Okay, I'm gonna read to you, but you don't have to look at me the whole time. Let's look at the garden. Can you see it? You never know what's running around out there. Okie dokie. Okay. Walking Wolf by Nancy A. Collins. Prologue. Every kid plays cowboys and Indians sometime or another, no matter what their sex, race, background, or temperament. I was no different, except for I wasn't playing. It was how I lived. My name is William Skillet. That's my white name. My Indian name, some would say it's my real name, is Walking Wolf. I was raised by the Comanche as one of their own in the open plains of what are now the states of New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. Now, I know what you're thinking. I can't be more than 50 years old, by the looks of me. And the last time the Comanche lived free of the reservations was before the turn of the 20th century, which would make me either quite well preserved or a damn liar. Well, I have been known to lie on occasion, but this time I'm giving you the straight skinny. To the best of my knowledge, I'm 150, give or take a year. The reason I'm vague as to my exact age is that I don't really know when I was born. 8 Clouds Rising, my adoptive father, could only tell me that he found me during the season the buffalo cows dropped their calves, the year after the smallpox went through the tribe, claiming the life of its only natural son, which probably means I was born sometime in 1844. But I can tell you a reason for me being so youthful looking for a man a century and a half old. Not exactly what you'd call human. Hell, I'm not human at all. The closest thing you might be able to relate to me is what's known as a werewolf, but not the kind you see in the picture shows that sprout hair and teeth every time there's a full moon. The truth of my kind is a lot more complicated and frightening than that. What you're about to read is the story of my life, leastwise the early part of it. I wrote it down more for my own sake. For my own sake than anything else. As I've gotten older, the past has a tendency to be both fuzzy and painfully distinct. Sometimes when I get up in the morning, I'm surprised to find myself in a house, not in a teepee. And when I look out the picture window, I almost expect to see a herd of buffalo grazing in the valley below. Other times I find myself grasping for the name of a loved one, like it was a bubble in a stream. I do not want to forget that time, to lose the truth under the weight of the new century's memories. Now, I don't want anybody reading this to think I'm bragging about having led an interesting life. Life ain't nothing more than things that happen to you on your way to dying. Some folks just have a lot more things happen to them, and in an entertaining fashion. I guess I've said all that needs to be said in the way of an explanation, except that anybody attempting to find a moral will be gut-shot. Chapter 1. I don't remember my real family, and although I have had all kinds of names in my life, both Indian and white, I don't know the name my flesh and blood folks gave me when I was born. All I know about my ma is that she was human, and probably from the old country. My pa was Varger, that's what werewolves call themselves, who went by the name of Howler. And for some reason, in the early 1840s, they moved out into the wilderness surrounding what would eventually become Dallas, Texas. My story begins with a Comanche brave named 8 Clouds Rising coming home after a successful attempt at stealing Apache ponies. 8 Clouds belonged to the Pentucket Band, who were famed for their lightning-fast raids, hence their nickname of Wasp Raiders. As he made his way back to his camp, he caught sight of a thin spume of smoke on the horizon. Then he spied the buzzards. 8Clouds, being inquisitive by nature, decided to check it out. The cabin was still smoldering when he arrived. To hear him tell it, he'd been surprised to see a white homestead so close to Comanche territory. Whites preferred being within a half a day's ride of one another, yet the nearest white settlement had to be a good 3 days' journey from here. As he drew closer, the ponies rolled their eyes and whinnied at the stink of death hanging in the air. There was a body sprawled before the collapsed room of the 2-room cabin. The corpse was that of a boy of 9 or 10, the same age as his own son, Little Eagle, who died last spring. The boy was dressed in homespun, The boy was dressed in a rough woven flaxen shirt and crude canvas overalls. His feet were bare and tough as leather. He'd been shot in the chest, and his throat slit ear to ear. His sculpted skull was black and clotted with blood. My ma's body lay between the barn and the cabin, carrion birds picking at her eyes. She lay on her back, her skirts hiked above her hips. Her killer had cut out her sex and removed her left breast. 8Clouds was so disgusted that he spat in the dirt. He'd claimed his fair share of trophies, but there is no honor in making a trophy of a woman's breast, or adorning a war spear with the scalp of a young boy. But then, this wasn't the work of Comanches or Apaches, either for that matter. The horses that left their tracks at the massacre site had been wearing shoes. That was a white man's crime. My pa was laying near my ma. He'd been skinned alive, judging by how his limbs were twisted and contorted. As 8Clouds knelt to examine the butchered remains, he noticed the peeled, snarling muzzle of the wolf jutting from my pa's face. If 8Clouds had ever needed proof that the whites were bad crazy, this was certainly it. While he had never seen one himself, 8Clouds knew the Comanche legends that told how Coyote, the first and greatest of the skinwalkers, had helped human beings by giving them fire, teaching them language, and interceding with Great Spirit on their behalf. And damned if the whites hadn't gone and skinned him alive. As 8Clouds stood pondering the immensities of the whites' folly, he heard what sounded like a baby crying. He looked around and noticed a smokehouse next to the barn, and in it there was the crying that seemed to be coming from it. Like I said, 8Clouds was inquisitive by nature, so he decided to take a look inside. My folks' smokehouse wasn't any different from any other smokehouse you'd find it at that time, except that there were a couple of human carcasses hanging up with the dressed-out antelopes and jackrabbits. There was also a couple of barrels set behind the door, and it was in one of these that 8Clouds found a baby wrapped in a blanket, crying to beat the band. That squalling infant was none other than me. According to 8Clouds, I instantly stopped crying when he picked me up. A good luck sign, according to the Comanches. I looked him straight in the eye and smiled. He could tell by the color of my eyes, yellow, that I weren't no human baby. 8Clouds couldn't believe his luck. Here he'd been worrying about his squaw, Thunder Buffalo Woman, being so sad on account of their son's death, and now he finds a baby skinwalker. Eight Clouds wasted no time in making a papoose, cradle of some of the antelope hide, and a couple of barrel staves. Pretty soon I was accompanying him on his way back to camp, dangling off the horn of the saddle he'd taken from a Mexican ranchero he'd killed the season before. When Eight Clouds got home, he showed me the Thunder Buffalo woman. The prospect of having a young'un around the teepee cheered her up to no end. She suggested to Eight Clouds that they take their new son to Old Medicine Dog, the tribe's shaman, so I could get myself properly named. Medicine Dog was a wise man and quite old, even when I was coming up. He was the one who tended the tribe when the folks fell ill, the one who could look at a buffalo's afterbirth and tell whether next season was going to be cold, the one who could see the future in tossing of the bones. He was also in charge of naming the babies born to the tribe, at least the boys. Medicine Dog was sitting outside his teepee smoking his pipe, looking like he'd been expecting Eight Clouds and Thunder Buffalo woman the whole time. Good day, Medicine Dog. Yes, it is a good day, Eight Clouds. What is Thunder Buffalo woman? What is Thunder Buffalo woman carrying? Have you a new son? I found this child in what was left of a white homestead. I would make him my son. Eight Clouds motioned for Thunder Buffalo woman to show me the Medicine Dog. Medicine Dog squinted at me with his left eye. He'd lost the right to an Apache arrowhead years before, and puffed on his pipe. Your new son is a skinwalker, Eight Clouds. You have brought good luck to the Pintaka. Getting to his feet, he motioned for Thunder Buffalo woman to hand me over. He stood there for a long moment, staring down at me as I played with his medicine necklace, then entered his teepee. Several long minutes passed before he returned, handing me to my new mother. He nodded to himself as if pleased by what had transpired. I offered smoke to the sky and the earth, and to the four corners of the world, and to the Great Spirit. In the smoke I saw the name of your son, Little Wolf. And so that's how I got my first name and became an official member of the Comanche. When I was younger, folks used to always ask me all kinds of questions. What was it like being raised by Indians? Were the Comanches really murdering red devils? Were they really cannibals? Sorry. Well, the Comanche was a warrior society. No two ways about it. They were born horsemen and proud of their skill in combat. They thought farming and settling down was for weak and cowardly types. They valued bravery and courage above all else, even to the point where a warrior preferred to die young in battle than to grow too old to wage war. Needless to say, we were always fighting with someone or another. Before the whites came, the Comanche had a running feuds with Pawnee, Cheyenne, Dakota, Ohlone, Apache, Osages, and the Tonkawas. Later, when the Europeans started to try to settle Texas, they switched over to fighting first the Spanish, then the Anglos full time. But just so you won't think we were completely inhospitable, they were on decent terms with the Wichitas, Wacos, and the Tawankis. I'm terrible. Most of the time. As for them being murdering devils, I'll grant you they could be downright merciless to those they decided were enemies. I've seen Comanche braves bury Apache warriors up to their ears in hot sand and coat their heads with honey so the ants would pick their skulls clean while they were still alive. Then again, I've known a Comanche brave to give water to a white he found dying of gangrene up on the open prairie, wrapping him in a blanket and sit up with him just so he wouldn't die in his lonesome out in the middle of nowhere. The Comanche could be funny that way. Like I said, they were a proud people and fearless. They were lords of the southern plains, and they damn well knew it. The Mexican rancheros who first settled the area lived in fear of them. The Comanche braves were often in the habit of riding into San Antonio, thronging the streets and public squares, swaggering around like they owned the place. Hell, they even made the townspeople hold the reins of their ponies as they went about their raiding shops and houses. Leastwise, that's what Medicine Dog told me. By the time I was coming up, things were already changing for the Comanche in Texas, and not for the better. And as for them being cannibals, well, that story got started on account of this band of Comanche called Tamina, also known as the Liver Eaters. There weren't many of them left, and they felt inferior to the bigger, more powerful tribes like the Wasp Raiders and the Antelope people. So they came up with this story about eating the livers of their enemies. Now, the Comanche have this big taboo concerning cannibalism, and no Comanche in his right mind would ever think about eating another human being. But it sure did make them sound fierce, didn't it? Unfortunately, most settlers tended to take things at face value and believed they really were cannibals. Needless to say, the Tamina got exterminated mighty quick. Thanks to 8 Clown Rising and Thunder Buffalo Woman, I grew up in a happy, healthy childhood. And personally, I couldn't have asked for a better childhood. The Comanche cherished their children, seeing how they tended not to produce that many in the first place. And a baby's chance of getting to be a full-grown adult was pretty dicey. Now, the one thing you got to remember about the Comanche, they were a pragmatic people. While they believed in the Great Spirit, in the spirit world beyond this one, they didn't spend much of their spare time fretting over it, unlike other folks, both red and white. They didn't hold with coaxing children towards good behavior by promising them all kinds of sweets after they die, or frightening them away from evil by threatening eternal damnation. Instead, children were shown by word and example that the respect of their fellow tribesmen was to be desired in and of itself. And the condemnation and contempt of the tribe was to be dreaded like the plague. Men who were brave and generous were applauded and respected as role models. And since it was practically impossible to live a secluded life in a Comanche encampment, everyone was aware of the conduct of everyone else. It was a remarkably effective way of keeping kids in line, let me tell you. I learned to ride as soon as I could walk. The Comanche didn't cut you any slack in that area. If you weren't handy with a horse, then what good were you? Every Comanche child, boy and girl alike, was expected to know how to handle a full-grown horse all on their own by age 5. When I was 3 years old, 8 Clouds lashed me to one of his ponies with a rawhide lariat, and while he held the pony by its tether, he circled that pony around and around until I literally became part of the animal. As a child, I had plenty of friends. It didn't make any difference to them that I was white, even less that I was marked as Medicine Dog's understudy as the tribe's shaman. Kids is kids. Like I said, I had plenty of playmates, but my favorites were Small Bear and Flood Moon, Lean Fox, and Quanah, who would later become known better to the world outside the Comanches as Quanah Parker. Quanah and I also had something in common, since he was half-white, the son of a captive woman and a great war chief. Pita Nakuna, the great war chief, Pita Nakuna. Many summer days was spent running around the plains, naked as jaybirds, whooping it up in grand old style, playing games like Grizzly Bear, and hunting hummingbirds and bullbats with our toy bows and arrows. Sometimes we'd play camp, and each of the boys would team up with the girls so they could pretend to be man and wife. The girls would set up a windbreak on the banks of the stream, while us men would go out and hunt squirrels so they could have something to cook for us when we came back to camp. I always made it a point to snag Flood Moon as my wife every time. Sometimes we'd get into mischief, like the time Quanah Small Bear and I got one of 8 Cloud's ponies and backed him up into the teepee where the elders of the tribe, who were too old to wage war, spent their time smoking the pipe and chewing the fat about the good old days. Lord, did that thing buck. The old men come pouring out of the smoke lodge like angry bees, shouting and carrying on. Quanah got away, but the old men latched on to me and Small Bear and started making noises about punishing us for our lack of respect. Just then, old Medicine Dog came up and motioned for the elders to be quiet. Now, you old fellows, you were once boys like Little Wolf and Small Bear. Don't you remember what devils you were? Forgive them their action, for will boys not be boys? The old men looked at one another, laughed, and let the matter drop. After all, they were old men, peaceable after all the years spent on the warpath, not young warriors jealous of their dignity. All in all, they were very fine old gents. Every year near winter, the various bands of Comanche would gather together. It was a time when news was swapped, friends and families see one another, marriages and liaisons between different bands became formalized, and the braves took a breather from the hunting and the raiding that filled the rest of the year. There were several different branches of the Comanches back then, some of which were more powerful than others. Like I said before, I was a member of the Pintaka, the Wasp Band. Others include, please forgive me, Yanka Kakura, the Yap Eaters, the Antelope People, the Antelope People, the Buffalo Eaters, the Water Horses, and the Wa'ai, the Wormy Penis, just to name a few. I should have looked up these names before I tried to pronounce them. I'm very sorry. But even collected together in all their glory, there couldn't have been more than 10,000 Comanches. So you can imagine the damage that was done when smallpox broke out in 1850. I couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 at the time, but I remember it being worse than any nightmare I'd ever had, or even ever will again. It was then that my adopted mother, Thunder Buffalo Woman, died. It broke poor 8 Cloud's heart, and he was never quite the same after that, even though he ended up taking her younger sister, Little Dove, to wife a year or 2 later. I was 12 years old by the time I finally got to go on my first real buffalo hunt. I was riding with 8 Clouds and several other braves from our band, including one who went by the name of Grass Rope. Grass Rope's specialty was lying low in the grass, sneaking up on the buffalo while they were grazing. He wore a coyote skin draped over his shoulders to mask his scent. Since coyotes were always hunting the fringe of the herds, looking to scavenge afterbirth during calving season, the buffaloes don't pay much attention, since coyotes were too small to bring down even the youngest calf. When we spied the herd, Grass Rope got off his pony and motioned for me to follow him. Holding his bow at the ready, he got down on his hands and knees and started creeping through the prairie grass in the direction of the herd. I followed him, doing my best to keep upwind of the grazing buffalo. I was very proud that a skilled stalker such as Grass Rope had chosen me to accompany him. I was determined to cover myself with glory the best I could. But as we kept closer and closer to the herd, I heard something strange begin to happen. My sense of smell had always been acute, but for some reason it was incredibly keen that day. I could smell the grass as the sun dried on the dew from the stems, the pungent odor of buffalo. Oh, my neighbor's home. Let's switch angles. Alright. There we go. Okay. Okay. Where was I? Oh, I felt very, very proud that a skilled stalker such as Grassrope had chosen me to accompany him. I was determined to cover myself with glory the best I could. But as we crept closer and closer to the herd, something strange began to happen. My sense of smell had always been acute, but for some reason it was incredibly keen that day. I could smell the grass as the sun dried the dew from its stems, the pungent odor of buffalo wool, the reek of their flops. But more importantly, I could smell the coyote pelt that Grassrope that Grassrope was wearing. I caught its scent, and for the briefest moment I knew everything there was to know about it, about the beast it had once belonged to, its sex, age, health, and social standing in its pack. The surge of recognition was so powerful, I had to lower my head and whine. Grassrope gave me a hard look. Hunting was serious business, and it was no time for foolish pranks. "Be quiet, little wolf," he whispered. I tried to keep silent, but I was suddenly gripped by a strange fire that burned deep inside me like a banked coal. I bit my tongue to keep from crying out, causing blood to flow. The fire in my belly was growing, and my skin felt as if it were covered with biting ants. My bones seemed to be inflating inside my flesh, and for a fleeting second I thought I was afraid I'd been bitten by a rattlesnake without knowing it. Grassrope grew very angry with my whimpering and twitching. He turned to give me the sharp side of his tongue, but what he saw made him forget about scolding me. Even though I was in great pain, I knew something must be very wrong, because his face suddenly went pale under his paint. Next thing I know, the buffaloes started to bellow and stampede, running away from us. Without thinking, I leapt to my feet and started chasing after the fleeing buffalo, running like a band of Apaches were at my heels. I vaguely remember seeing some of the other braves running from the hunting party, sitting astride their ponies, pointing in my direction, their lances and arrows forgotten. I spotted a young buffalo calf that had lost its mother, and it was panicked, placing itself on the fringe of the herd. I closed the distance between us, separating it from its fellows, snapping at its trembling flanks. The frightened youngster bellowed for its mother, but it was too late. She was already miles away, trapped within the nucleus of the herd, helpless to defend her errant child. Without realizing what I was doing, I leapt onto the calf's woolly back, sinking my talons and my teeth into its neck. The calf shrieked and, overbalancing, fell on top of me. And at 70-plus pounds of buffalo calf is nothing to sneeze at, believe me. Although I had the wind knocked out of me, I refused to let go. The dying calf jerked and kicked, but to no avail. I tore out its throat with my bare teeth. I stared down at the calf as the calf bled its life onto the prairie grass. I threw back my head and howled in triumph. And it was only then, as I licked the fresh blood off my snout, that I realized I was covered in fur and that my hands boasted cruel curved talons in the place of fingernails. 8 Clouds rode up, reining his pony at a safe distance. The pony rolled, its eyes stamped the ground nervously, uncertain whether to stay or flee. 8 Clouds looked the same way. My son, are you still inside?" "Yes, Father, I'm still here." My voice was strangely distorted and gravelly, like an animal given the power of human speech. Eight Clouds nodded, relieved. You have hunted well. You bring honor to our lodge. Grassrope rode up, looking positively thunderstruck. What matter of thing is this? He demanded, pointing at me. 8Cloud smiled, proud enough to burst. It's not a thing. It is my son, Little Wolf. Grassrope shook his head in amazement. He is a walking wolf. Never have I seen such a thing. And that is how I got my adult name, and how I shapeshifted for the first time in my life. I didn't realize it then, but my boyhood days were gone forever. Okay. Hey, that's the end of part 1. If you liked it, let me know. So, you know, it's long. It's long, so I'll just be doing them by chapter, but it's good. So, okay, have yourselves a great rest of the day. Love ya. Bye.